It's time for this week's episode of Brandon's Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon's Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon's Sports Talk. In today's episode, I had the privilege to interview Jackson and Matthew, the podcast of I think We're Good Here Volleyball podcast. How are y'all doing today?
Good. Thanks for having us.
Doing great. Thank you very much.
Matt, can you talk about how you got started with the podcast?
Yeah, so I think when you're all cooped up during COVID, everything sounds like a good idea just to gather some kind of entertainment in your life. And originally it started because when I went to Pepperdine, I played for this guy, Marv Dunphy, and he's a world champion, a World Cup winner, and an Olympic champion as a coach. And so I'd go to his office every day and chat for an hour, and he would tell stories through the channel of volleyball. And that's kind of where I gathered the idea that I learned more about volleyball just through story. And Jackson's one of my best friends of all time. And I said, you want to hop on and interview these great people and learn about something we like? And he said, I'm in. And that's kind of how it got going.
Jack, how did you know that you wanted to start the podcast?
Really, because Matt was fired up about it. You know, I'm a podcast guy. I listen to podcasts all the time. A couple people I know have them, and Matt was so enthusiastic about it, and he's really well connected in the volleyball world. And it was, like he said, during COVID, it was going to be a good chance for me to learn from different people.
Matt, how did you come up with the genre of your podcast being volleyball and the name of your podcast, I Think We're Good Here?
Yeah, so that guy, Mark Dunphy, he's a prolific name in both men's and women's volleyball now. Anytime he leaves a room or anytime he finishes a conversation, a speech, whatever kind of rhetoric it is, he says, I think we're good. I thought it was the perfect way to end any kind of conversation that we have, especially in a podcast format. So then we said, let's just name it, I Think We're Good Here. And the reason we picked volleyball as the channel and the genre specifically was it's what we know and love the most. And Jackson being at UNR, University of Nevada, Reno, as a volleyball coach, and myself as a professional volleyball player, we felt it would be proper that we would just keep channeling volleyball.
Matt, how did you know that you wanted to start the podcast knowing that you're a volleyball coach? And how has that helped you?
I think, Jackson, that's you.
Was that me? Okay, sorry. Like I said, it's a good avenue to learn more things from different people who I may not come in contact with otherwise. Yeah, I mean, I take little tidbits from every podcast we do, and sometimes it's not about coaching, it's more about just life. But yeah, I just thought it was a good chance to kind of improve on myself and my coaching.
How did you know, Jackson, you wanted to start after your playing career?
I wanted to start coaching?
Yes.
A lot of the most influential people in my life were coaches, people that coached me directly on teams I was on, and just some of the other people I was around. Me and Matt got to know each other through coaching at a club called Santa Monica Beach Club. And some of those people were my best friends, and it just seemed like a good thing to do post-college. And then I kind of just got the bug and went with it.
Matt, how did you know that you wanted to branch into volleyball?
Well, it started really earlier. I think the running joke amongst my friends and I is that I didn't really have an option, and I started setting up volleyball in the womb because my mother was an Olympian and my father played intercollegiate in the States. And I just loved it. I resented my parents for it, like all 12-year-olds do. You go through like the hate stage. And then I just started enjoying it more and more and more until the day my mom said, you can't walk into the gym unless you have volleyball shoes. So I took a week off. Next thing you knew, I had volleyball shoes and I was back at it. And I couldn't resist.
Who are some of the people that y'all have interviewed?
Jackie, you take this one.
Just a couple off the top of my head. Jordan Larson, who's the national team captain. David Hunt, the coach at Pepperdine. Keegan Cook, the coach at University of Washington. Aaron Mansfield and John Mayer, who both coach beach and indoor at Loyola Marymount University. Some of our friends, Josh Taylor, Matt Tarantino, Rich Barraza.
Yeah, just so happens Josh Taylor's the head coach in the University of Missouri.
Yeah.
Nice friend to have. Then we got national team players, national team captain, Micah Christensen, Micah Ma, Josh Tuaninga, Micah Hancock, going to an Olympics, which is huge. Maddie Kingdon, Lauren Carlini. Man, we're lucky. We've been able to pick we picked some pretty awesome brains.
How has, of course, being a coach and a player helped you with your podcast and getting some of those big name people?
I think it's just the networking through the years. I think Matt's done most of the legwork on getting guests and contacting them, but they're both people that we're interested in and kind of know a little bit of their story. So we kind of know where to navigate the conversation. Yeah, Matt, you got anything?
Yeah, most of them are just, I wouldn't necessarily say friends. The ones that I have the most fun doing are the people that I don't know at all. Because you really have to apply that 80-20 rule of just sit back and listen 80% of the time and talk the other 20%. And I end up learning more about people, obviously, that you don't know because you can't say anything.
When it comes to the coaches, what levels do you interview coaches on? D1, D2, or JUCO, or all of them?
Most of the coaches we've had have been Division I coaches, but in the coaching profession, you go up through the ranks. So some of them started in club and then were assistants or started at JUCO. We'd like to get some club directors on pretty soon, just to see kind of what that world's like for them, but mostly Division I.
What are some of y'all's favorite memories of starting the podcast? I think we're good here.
And we were so bad. We were so bad at the beginning. And honestly, the best memories are we debrief everyone after every podcast. And hearing people who listen to our podcast and then become guests on our podcast and hearing their criticisms and then hearing their praise later on as the podcast is developed has been really, really nice. That's like a fond memory that I have with Jackson, aside from the laughs during the podcast, but like doing the fist pump of like, we're doing it. We're making it. We're finally making it work a little bit, you know?
How has COVID brought y'all together with the podcast, and what are some of the struggles with COVID y'all have faced with the podcast?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it was a big reason we started it. You know, I know Matt mentioned to me a few months before COVID that he had an idea of starting one. But then when COVID hit, I think we were a month into COVID, and Matt was like, all right, I'm doing it. Do you want to do it with me? I was on board. Some of the challenges I think were so the time difference with our guests, that can be a challenge, but it was kind of more beneficial during COVID than anything because it took our time. It took some of our time up, and it really kept us connected as friends. I thought it was a cool thing to just talk about and try to work on together.
Yeah, it helped me a ton. It was cathartic for me. It's like therapeutic because you, as an athlete, and I'm sure as a coach, you get to hear some of the trials and tribulations other people are going through or have gone through. And it makes you feel like you're not on an island and that like every journey is a little bumpy, and whatever it is, like if it's a confidence problem or it's a guy on your team, a coaching aspect, whatever it is, you're like, oh, okay, I'm not alone. There's other people out there that have it rougher or have it better, but it was huge. I needed it in COVID, that's for sure.
Matt, starting off with you, what is some of your future plans, and then Jackson?
In life, in volleyball, and
For the podcast.
let's see. I think Dax and I have talked about this a lot, actually. There are no plans. It's just we try to go day by day, like in a volleyball match. You just want to go point by point and interview by interview, and we just want to keep getting better every interview. And like Jackson said, we want to branch out, and the most important thing is essentially the integrity of our podcast. We don't want to start branching out to, like, Jackson loves beach volleyball, and the amount of times that we've argued, this is not a beach volleyball podcast, this is an indoor volleyball podcast. But yeah, we just want to keep getting better at it, and we want to keep branching out into the indoor world, like Jackson said, with bringing on directors from club and JUCO head coaches and D2 head coaches, and a lot more women is what I really want to do, and I know Jackson wants that too, because it's such a male-dominated sport, and just keep getting perspective and just educating more and more people, just like we're being educated.
Jackson, what are some of your future plans?
Yeah, to piggyback on Matt there, I think a wider variety of guests in the indoor world, and like we said, club coaches, JUCO coaches, maybe more people that we don't know, to kind of branch ourselves out more. And then I think some feedback that I've gotten about our podcast is we're not the most consistent, because we both have pretty busy lives, and now that things are getting back to normal, we both have
awesome feedback, though, because that means the people want more.
That's so wonderful. What is something that y'all both learn now that y'all didn't know before starting a podcast?
I'll start with this one.
Yeah.
So my coaching philosophy has changed a little bit since we started the podcast. We interviewed a few people about ecological dynamics, and it's research on skill acquisition and how learners learn the best. And it's pretty much an environmental constraints-led approach. And a few years ago, I would have said that was really stupid and been closed off to it. But learning about it, I gave it a shot this season, and I took some good bits of knowledge away from that.
What about you, Jackson?
I think the biggest takeaway for me is that I'm learning how to be a better listener. And like I talked about earlier, that 80-20 rule, where I talk 20% of the time, or Jackson and I talk 20% of the time, and they talk 80, and it's manifesting into my daily life. And it helps a lot when you sit back and actually listen to what people have to say, because all of a sudden they start telling you more about themselves than you ever thought you would have known.
Of course, for both of y'all, do y'all foresee y'all combining, of course, with volleyball being indoor and beach volleyball? Do you see in the future combining it into both indoor and beach volleyball, interviewing people from both sides of the spectrum?
No, because there's already a couple really good beach volleyball podcasts out there that we both really enjoy listening to. And yeah, I think there's so much indoor volleyball out there that's not covered and people don't know about, that there's no reason for us to go after beach players. Now, if there's a beach player with indoor experience at a young age or something like that, we'll talk about their indoor career, kind of like we did with John Mayer, who is the beach coach at Loyola Marymount University. We talked about his indoor career. Yeah, there's so much opportunity for us to interview people from indoor that it's really not necessary. And Matt's done some good convincing of that.
What advice would you give somebody looking to start their own volleyball podcast?
You're gonna suck. The first, I don't know, what would you say? The first 5 are really hard. I was really nervous for at least the first 15 minutes of the first 5. And then the first 10 are just not good because you don't understand each other yet. You don't know when to interject or how to be polite, or you're overly polite, right? Because you don't know how to adapt to your partner yet. But you're going to be bad, but it will get better. And do what you think is right. Follow your vision and don't sell out. Like Jackson and I multiple times have had the thought of, because other people have interjected their thoughts and we have sat down and talked about it and said, that's not what our plan was. We have our personality. If they want their personality, then they can, screw off and do their own thing. But this is our podcast and it's ours. So make it yours.
What about you?
Yeah, along the same lines, it's going to be really weird to hear your own voice on the microphone at first. Yeah, and not that, like what Matt's saying, you're going to be really bad at first, but you're going to get better. And me and Matt both know we're not like an excellent podcast yet because we don't have enough practice at it. But what we're doing now is way better than what we did before at the beginning. And other than that, like, the reason we started this to have fun with it and to learn about other people. And we really take pride in trying to keep that the reason we're doing it.
That's wonderful. Where can my listeners find your podcast? I think we're good here, volleyball, on social media and podcast platforms.
We're on Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts. You can find our website on Podbean. You can also access it through Podbean apps, the actual direct podcast. And then obviously you can find us on both Instagram and Facebook with the I think we're good here. There's no spaces in between on Instagram, I don't think, but you just look up I think we're good here. And if you find us on Instagram, it gives you direct access to our Spotify and iTunes accounts.
Thank you again, Matt and Josh, for your interview, and best of luck in your future, wherever it may hold you with I think we're good here, volleyball.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us.
You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Facebook at Brandon Sports Talk, Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again for your interview, and best of luck.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.